Hello everyone. It's been a long time since our last devlog, let alone any development updates from our server. So for this reason, and after some consideration, I just want to go ahead and make this video now. I think we can all agree that this is just really long overdue, even if there isn't that much significant gameplay to show for the video. While there's a bunch of content I'll be revealing for this video, I want to first address the questions about development. In short, SAI is still alive and kicking. No, Blam is not cancelled and development is still active, just albeit slower than I'd like. This is because of a few things which I briefly mentioned in the MIA video. It's been incredibly difficult for me to find dedicated members for the project throughout this year, and I haven't really had much luck with it until recently. Life also gets in the way for some of us, which we can't ignore as well. I'd like to also mention that this is a passion project for us, so we like to take our time with it and ensure that we can create the best possible version of this game. Almost everything about the game's design has just dramatically changed since the time of the last devlog. Trust me when I say the version of the game back then, if it was released, it would have just turned out to be another Reason to Die clone, or just slop, which are both things that we want to avoid. But really, the last thing I would want to do is to cancel the project. I don't mean to let people down with just how it is, there's just things out of my control. I just ask if you're interested in this project, if you can understand the setbacks we've had. Since the MIA video, we resumed progress and picked up where we left off earlier this year. With that out of the way, let's get to the meat of this devlog and check out what we accomplished. The survivor's main arsenal of weapons is something we want to keep fresh, abundant, and diverse from one another. While you may see some weapons from our previous projects return, we also want to introduce new alternate weapons. So let's talk about the new guns first, and then what will be returning. So the M16A5 is a product of the alternate history in the world of Blam. In real life, this gun is mostly a forgotten concept, which never got its spotlight. Think of this like a hybrid of the M4 and the M16 together. It has a wide variety of features and accessories to boast because of this. It has the collapsible stock of an M4A1, while the body and barrel of the M16A4 in its default configuration. Because of its modularity and its alternate history, it can get into a handful of variants which switch up its playstyle, or just give you a meme setup. The AK-103 improves significantly upon its predecessor, the AK-47. Fundamentally, it's the same with the high damage output and tough recoil pattern. There's been a lot of small improvements made to this weapon, such as the lighter materials and better modularity for attachments. This allows the AK to be far more versatile than it was ever before, converting it into one of its many variants, such as the AKS-74U, the AK-105, the AK-74M, and its classic wooden variant. It'll still do fine in combat, even if you make it as ugly as humanly possible. The M500 is a cheap, reliable shotgun that will do you no wrong. It's a starter pump shotgun with a few variant attachments to change its performance, similar to the M16 and the AK. There's really not much to say about this simple weapon, other than its obvious superiority in close range. This is the same about the double barrel shotgun. It's a boomstick meant to shoot a crowd of enemies, along with the wall that's right behind them. You'll need to make use of its high damage output, as you only have 2 shells to work with before needing to reload. The op will be the definitive bolt-action sniper, which emphasizes taking out high-priority targets at range. Like the other weapons, there will also be variant attachments here, which help you either become a flat-out camper, or one of those COD movement sweats on Adderall. The Super Shorty is a compact secondary shotgun for situations where you just really want to have fun in close range, but don't want to invest in a primary shotgun. It excels in CQC, but harshly falls off with range, so you need to use it in a pinch just like the other secondaries. The 44 Magnum is the first hand cannon unlock for the survivors. It's very precise and deals excellent damage at range. Its best attachments lie within its barrels, allowing you to either cut it short for even more damage, or make it heavier to control its wrist-shattering recoil for quicker follow-up shots. Or getting a barrel that's so long it cuts out of the preview image. So with the RPG, it's just an RPG. There's really nothing quirky to say about this weapon. It's as plain and simple as a powerful rocket launcher can get. To address your farming concerns, it'll be one of the few launchers that you can select from the armory. Now let's get on to the returning weapons. So let's start with the MP5. The MP5 will be an all-rounder type of SMG that can do you no wrong when used correctly. It boasts pretty average stats for what it's worth, so you need to use its variant attachments to improve areas such as stealth, handling, or cost efficiency. The file also returns, sporting new synthetic furniture and further improvements to its design. Unlike its RTD counterpart, it's full auto by default but can still be switched back to semi-auto. Its role is to be a high damage battle rifle, though it's going to be pretty inaccurate and has high recoil, so shooting in bursts is going to be recommended. The Scorpion remains somewhat unchanged. It has minor upgrades to fit in with the detailed designs we intend for the weapons. It's intended to be your designated low-rank machine pistol, being cheap but at the expense of its fire rate and overall damage output. Alright, the elusive Deagle, a powerful hand cannon like the 44 Magnum, which in contrast has slightly more ammo but higher recoil than its brother. What's returning with this weapon is that it's gone through a handful of iterations since its first release back when SAI was just around the form, back in the Reason to Die days. The weapon system has gone through a massive overhaul from the previous one revealed in the last devlog. This one now is a lot more flexible and has new stats like damage range, velocity, and ammo types for example. Along with this is an improved camera system. This is a lot more in line with the vision I have for combat and movement in this game. In addition to this, we plan on having shoulder swapping for your character. If you ever played games like Apotos Rising 2 or World War Z, you'll see the same feature here. Basically, it gives you more options to peek and shoot at enemies at angles you normally wouldn't be able to because your camera is on your right side. Though in these same games, the way your character physically handles a weapon also changes when you shoulder swap. We're accounting for this and we're in the process of improving how we also create animations. So normally for the animations, you'll likely just rig a weapon, use the animation tool, export it, and blam, there's your weapon animations. But with this game, it's a lot more complicated. So you see, first we need to create those handful of default animations. Then after that, we need to create the variant animations that account for the different attachments we have planned for the future. But the process isn't over yet because we'll have to make left-handed versions of all those dozens of default and variant animations we just made. Then later down the line, we gotta retroactively update all of them because we realized the Roblox exporting process was glitched and froze up a section of the art. Now you get the idea why we need to use this inverse kinematics animation method. To make it simple, we can fit the hands where they should be when handling the specific weapons, and updating their positions if certain attachments like grips are present. It makes designing and animating these weapons so much less time consuming and not limiting us by just how difficult it would be to implement them. The infected and blam are also being handled with care, similar to the survivor weaponry. We want to make ferocious, gross, and unusual looking mobs that you may otherwise not see in other zombie games on the platform, but at the same time not get the game nuked by Roblox because we made it too gory or violent. Anywho, let's take a look at how gory and violent these new infected look. You may have already seen a few of these, but the Juggernaut's appearance was already given a complete upgrade from its original model. We intend for this mob to be the definitive tank type boss that you can play as. It's meant to be a team buster who has the strength to send you flying or pummel into paste, along with significant armored resistances. It's not intended to be found at the beginning of the game, like the Brute for example, but rather towards the middle to the end where the survivors have reached the last objective of a campaign or they're approaching the final few minutes of the round. So the slasher has gone through multiple iterations since the second devlog's appearance. We were experimenting with making it look more crazy in its design, but it just ended up making it more like a zombie watermelon hybrid or a Chainsaw Man character. We took a step back from this and we went back to what inspired the slasher originally, making it now look more believable as an infected that fits with the theme of the game. Just like the commons, it'll have a few multiple variant appearances with different hairstyles and skin tones, so you aren't always looking at the same type of slasher in the game. The goal for designing these mobs is to portray their lethality in their appearances and the abilities that we do for them. The Lurker is a special infected who originally has gone through questionable military experiments to make their cloaking technology. While it seems to work, this has proven to give the unwilling victim schizophrenia, a loss of identity, and the inability to sleep from the removal of its eyelids. The cloaking ability stems from his backpack, and with enough prep time, the Lurker can overload it and cause a giant flashbang effect in its vicinity, which will blind all of his victims. The Lurker is more like the glass cannon support type of mob, which, while it's frail, it has talon-like nails which can penetrate through a survivor's body. You're going to need to be careful while you're fighting alone in the dark, because if you start hearing fate whispering behind you, it's already too late. The Predator's appearance since his first concept has been dramatically changed, going from looking more similar to the Lurker in his militaristic design to now a more traditional one that you might find familiar. To reiterate from the last devlog, the Predator is a special infected who is a victim of a fictional terminal disease which makes your arteries and veins contort and elongate through the skin and out your wrists. The victim here was originally suffering from this with no way to treat it, and as the outbreak hit, they were also infected, but try to hide both of these diseases under their hoodie and bandages to get by with other survivor groups. Though this didn't really work out as they and everyone else around them were turned into the affected. The Predator will use his mutation to grapple onto you at high speeds and then gut you. If you're in critical condition, you need to stay on the lookout as this mob grappling onto you at terminal velocity will more than likely just turn you into a fine paste. And finally, we have a new special infected currently in progress that will be the fire zombie type in Blam. Right now, we're calling it the Pyrobat, which is going to be a charred and burnt infected who's forever cursed to eternal heat and fire, trapped inside the firefighter suit that it once wore before becoming infected. We're currently intending for this mob to be the one that you'll encounter towards the middle to late game. It has a high threat level, but it's not on par to a boss like the Juggernaut. We'll have more to say about this mob and its abilities once its design is complete. So learning from developing Reason to Die, we want to ensure that playing as the infected doesn't feel like a chore, and ideally even incentivize people into wanting to play as them, with the amount of mobs to play as and their insane abilities. Generally, our goal for the infected gameplay is for the player to primarily play as the specials. We want the balance between both the survivors and the infected to be sort of like a constant tug-of-war in which the infected will naturally become stronger with an increasing threat level, while the survivors will need to adapt to it by getting better weaponry and earning the money to get those weapons before the game snowballs into their deaths. With that being said, we also want the maps to be fun for both the survivors and infected, with a variety of real and fictional locations that you may recognize. The map design is something we want to get right in the beginning, providing a lot of interactions for both teams and just a box that doesn't let you create new strategies using certain infected or exploring new areas which you can fortify as a survivor. Here I'm going to mention the list of maps that we have currently for Blam by our map designer Minho that aren't Queen Street or Prototype Center, along with one that we currently have in progress. Were you a prisoner before or toss a board to avoid the incoming infection? All of that really doesn't matter now because you're in the middle of the ocean on a large prison ship where half of everyone was zombified. With nowhere else to run, the survivors are forced to exterminate the infection on board or become part of the horde. Wherever the ship is heading, it'll be better than what's happening on the mainland. You'll likely remember this from a previous Twitter post I did about this map, though the visuals here have been upgraded a lot, along with more areas to play in. Vacation at the Caribbean beach was cut short because of the outbreak, though luckily the security here was already on par to your private army. Being on a secluded island sounds ideal until it's already overrun by the infected. Luckily in the distance there's a ship that may give you salvation, so maybe you can grab its attention. This map also was given an upgrade with better areas for cover on the beach, along with new and improved buildings to fortify in. Maybe you'll find some things of this map sort of familiar and you'll get the hang of it quickly. In Utah lies the infamous Diesel River town, a humble town surrounded by factories and remnants of the old Wild West. It used to be a small tourist attraction with what remained of the town in the 1800s and has a rich western history of two brothers in their war. Soon after the outbreak began, an anti-petrol fanatic group took over the abandoned town, forming a cult from their isolation, all until the infected found them. You might have seen this map before, and that's because it's an upgraded version of this map's Reason to Die iteration. Originally it was added to debug, but it was never brought into the main game due to some gameplay issues. Here it's been reimagined with much more to do in locations such as nearing, dinner, grocery store, loop, and a small carnival plus the western remnants at the other side of the map. And finally, an unnamed yet familiar map that takes place in Italy. Currently in progress, this small port town was evacuated fairly quickly due to the word spreading across the globe about the outbreak occurring in the Americas and Asia. With it being nearly empty, it's now used primarily as an outpost for the Italian military and mafia to relocate survivors towards new communities and continue conducting business. As a massive horde approaches, the members of the outpost are quickly overrun, leaving barely anyone remaining. Maybe you could help the sole survivor return to their captain, and they'll bring you along in the ride before the horde overwhelms everyone. When this map is fully complete, it'll mark the final one we'll have ready for Blam at the moment. We feel the selection of maps we have for the project is great so far. While we do have a dozen of ideas for new maps which are both from the development team and community, it would be better to keep it at just a small handful so we aren't making new iterations and interactions on a bunch of medium to large size maps. And that's all we'll have for this devlog. I hope much of what we showed here answered many of your questions about if we're still developing and what direction we're heading with Blam. I'll acknowledge that it was terrible on my part to leave a lot of development radio silent up until now, so I'll try to make development and our future plans for the project much more public in the server despite its inactivity. We're aiming to have more than just designs to show you and have more gameplay in the future. If you want to see more minor development posts, give suggestions, ask questions, or provide feedback, you can by joining the Discord, which is linked in the description.